This is Marina Jenkins, Executive Director of the National Democratic Redistricting Committee.
Hi, this is Claire Lowe, Campaigns Director at the National Democratic Redistricting Committee.
And this is Drawing the Line,
a podcast about maps that shape our democracy and what it takes to make sure every vote counts.
Hey team, Marina Jenkins here, Executive Director of the National Democratic Redistricting Committee. And today I'm super excited for my colleague, Claire Lowe, to join us to talk about attacks on direct democracy. So I will introduce you all to Claire. Claire, say hello.
Thanks, Marina. Hi, everyone. My name is Claire Lowe, and I'm the Campaigns Director here at the NDRC and affiliated organizations. Very excited to be here today.
And Claire, given what you do, can you explain for folks for a minute what it is that your role is at NDRC and the kind of work that you do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I oversee a lot of our campaigns work, whether that is electoral work, making sure that we have the right people in the right places as we look forward to the next round of redistricting and redraws. And I also work with our great group of grassroots volunteers and our program to make sure that voters and volunteers are engaged and educated on the redistricting process.
Amazing. So the tough and dirty work of winning elections, running campaigns, getting folks mobilized to get out the vote, to get out and testify, to participate in their process. All of those things. And it's we really are appreciative of Claire's time today because I know it's been a busy time and a lot going on. So thank you for being here with us. What I wanted to talk to you about today is something that we've been seeing increasing over the past several years. And that is the attack on direct democracy. And I think, right now, particularly with what's going on at the federal level, we talk a lot about the attacks on democracy, the attacks on the right of, American citizens, the rights of American citizens, attacks on the right to vote. That is something that we are always in conversation about and always sort of wanting people to understand and to know is happening. This is a little bit more structural and a little more of a tougher situation because it's like a state by state situation. So direct democracy basically means that the public directly gets to make decisions about their government. So instead of having representatives like you do in Congress or in your state legislature who, then are the decision makers for policies, in a number of states across the country, voters get to actually make decisions through, what are called, ballot measures or ballot initiatives. So most modern democracies, including ours, are a mixture of elements of direct democracy. Again, as I said, getting people to go to the polls and vote on something that's going to be added to their constitution, for example, and representative democracies, which means the people choose representatives and the representatives choose policies. So, Claire, tell us a little bit more about what direct democracy is and sort of how it works on the whole.
Sure. Well, direct democracy in practice really looks like citizen-led ballot initiatives and amendments to state constitutions. And typically we find that they require a simple majority, 50% plus one, in order for them to be approved. And as of 2023, there are 26 states, including Ohio, that have allowed for citizen-led ballot initiatives and ballot measures. So it's not everywhere, but there are a number of states where those opportunities do exist. So some successful examples of these amendments that we've seen in the past include very successful Amendment 4 in Florida, which passed back in 2018. And that initiative restored the right to vote for people with prior felony convictions. There's also been measures to protect abortion rights, which we've seen most recently in Arizona, Maryland, Missouri, Montana, Colorado, and New York. So it's a really great way for folks to get involved and to make their voices heard on very particular issues and have that issue go directly to the ballot.
So the way I understand it, there are sort of two types of attacks that we see on direct democracy. There are structural attacks that change how a ballot initiative can be brought by voters, by advocates, and put on a ballot successfully. And then there are the kinds of attacks where once a ballot is successfully, placed, or once an initiative is placed on the ballot, then you get some undermining of its ability to succeed. Can you talk us through sort of examples of each of those things and where we've seen that?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think we are seeing both and have seen both pop up over the last couple of years. When you think about those substance attacks and the hacks that work within the current system, I think of Ohio issue 1 in 2024. So there was a ballot initiative that was placed on the ballot by a group of citizens in Ohio to change the way that the redistricting process would work for the next decade and beyond, to create a real citizen-led commission in Ohio. And what we saw was that Republicans did not want to see change to the way that the redistricting process worked. And so they were able to manipulate the system to ensure that the ballot initiative did not pass. They were able to put in very, very misleading and confusing ballot language on the ballot so that when voters went to the polls, they had a very long, very complicated set of language that explained what would happen, and it was very deceiving and misleading. And so, in Ohio, the Attorney General has the opportunity to create that ballot language, not the citizens who are bringing forward the change or the potential language.
And as you noted, part of why they're doing this is because these kinds of efforts can be successful and have been really successful. And in Ohio specifically, the redistricting ballot initiative in 2024 was on the heels of a successful reproductive rights ballot initiative. So there was a lot of motivation from the right to make sure that this one was not successful because they failed to stop the ballot initiative on reproductive rights from passing in 2023.
That's right. And actually, before the reproductive rights ballot initiative was passed in 2023, Republicans in Ohio actually attempted to stop or foil that particular ballot initiative by having a previous issue 1 in 2023, a special election that they called in August that would have raised the threshold for ballot initiatives from a simple majority, 50% plus 1, to 60%. And ultimately, that issue failed. And in Ohio, you still need that simple majority, which was very helpful as changes were made later on in 2023 for reproductive rights and on a number of other issues.
Yeah, we're seeing that increase in the threshold of what it takes to pass these in other places, aren't we?
Yes, we're seeing it in a number of other states. Missouri comes to mind in last year, and there are other efforts around the country where they're considering raising that threshold so it's more challenging for groups and individuals to place issues directly on the ballot.
Right. And it doesn't seem particularly complicated to understand, right? That, this all, feels like legislation or efforts to change, the structure of how these ballot initiative works. But at the end of the day, it's just a matter of they're trying to make it harder for voters to come together and get what they want. And as you said, these politicians, and mostly this is in Republican states. These are Republican far right extreme politicians saying we want to maintain control and we don't actually want the people to have self-determination. That is what it is. It's not more complicated than that.
Yes, that's absolutely right. These out-of-touch politicians don't want their constituents rising up and bringing forward these issues and circumventing their power.
There are a number of bills. So the sort of raising the threshold we've seen in a number of places, and we've seen this over the past several years, that it keeps sort of getting teased out and tested in some places. In some places, it has been successful. I think Florida even tried to raise it above 60%. Is that right?
Yeah. A few years ago, they tried to raise it to 2/3, right? So 66% instead of 60%. And Florida is actually one of the most challenging states for groups or individuals to place issues directly on the ballot because of that 60% threshold and because of pretty significant ballot requirements. You need, around 1 million signatures in order to place an issue directly on the ballot, which, can be quite challenging, for folks.
So it's already challenging in
Yeah.
Florida. It's already incredibly challenging in Florida. Florida has seen some really incredible successes through ballot initiatives on a number of issues, including redistricting. Back in 2010, there was redistricting reform via ballot initiative. More recently, the reproductive rights ballot initiative did not make it across the finish line. But again, this is in the context of, as there has been success through ballot initiative, through direct democracy, there is this backlash on the right, from the right, to make it harder. So it's already incredibly challenging in Florida, but advocates in the state have had success nonetheless. And yet the Florida legislature and DeSantis are now pushing even more intense and burdensome and restrictive measures. Isn't that right?
Yes, that's right. So Florida is already one of the hardest states for citizens to place an issue on the ballot and to have these citizen-led ballot initiatives. And there are a number of bills that are moving through the Florida legislature right now that would make it even more challenging. So there are a number of bills that would say that any group that's sponsoring a ballot initiative would have to put up $1 million bond with the Division of Elections in order to place, an issue on the ballot. And there are additional structural challenges that petitioners would face, including fines of up to $50,000 if they hire someone, either paid or unpaid volunteer, who isn't a U.S. citizen and a Florida resident, to collect petitions. And there's also just a number of additional bureaucratic steps that would be required, shorter times to turn in the ballots, additional requirements about who can collect petitions and talk to their neighbors about these particular issues, really just making it as challenging as possible for groups to place issues on the ballot.
And that last thing you said, the burden is being placed on organizers, on advocates, right? This is very targeted. This is very targeted at trying to undermine, to the point of making it impossible for community organizers, for community advocates, for organizations that exist, to serve their community, to serve their constituencies, to do their work and to use, their collective action, their ability to organize big groups of people to move policy in a direction that actually serves the people. And it's, it's a different, it's a different sort of thing. But I think about, the penalizing organizations who might hand out water to people waiting in line to vote, right? It's you're attacking the people who are doing their work every day to serve their communities. And that's who, might not have the resources to pay $1 million ahead of time to make sure that they can get this thing on the ballot. Or, they might not be able to bear the risk of criminal consequences if they, don't get their petitioning process absolutely perfect. And, and it's a scare tactic. And it's basically, a threat from this government against people who are just trying to organize their communities. And it's really, really disgusting, frankly.
Yeah, it is so incredibly sad to see that these out-of-touch politicians are trying to hoard power and take democracy out of the hands of everyday individuals who are in Florida or who are in other states, who just want to make sure that their voices are heard and that they are represented in their state constitutions. And here again, we see that the politicians are trying to further limit the process, attacking the ability to participate in the democratic process.
Well, I'm sure that we will continue, unfortunately, to see this kind of thing, and it really is just a piece of the broader fight of what's going on between the people who have power and want to retain it at all costs and the people. And, so if you see these types of bills being introduced in your state. Again, not every state has the ability to engage in direct democracy. North Carolina, for example, is a state where it's harder to do this, in a citizen-led way. And so we want to make sure that where this is possible, that it is protected, and that the people's ability to engage in direct democracy is not burdened or undermined to such a degree that it's actually impossible to use those tools. And that's the fight that we're up against. If you like our show, please follow us on YouTube and Instagram at Dem Redistrict, or visit our website at democraticredistricting.com. Thanks so much for listening.
This show is produced by Reed Dudley, Sophia Pedroso, and Manuel Marce. Special thanks to Alex Yang. Editing and mixing by Play Pretend Media. This podcast is paid for by the National Democratic Redistricting Committee.